So we created a framework that allows us to retrieve the sales order data with a bunch of ancillary data, and that would allow us then to display a bulk experience that would allow the user to be able to look at the information, make decisions around that, and collectively generate purchase orders. And it's also got some interesting multi-user kind of abilities on it.
Yeah, and there's also on the input side, where it starts off really is the CRE profile, where we're looking for the primary search here.
The concept of a primary search, which drives the application, and then a bunch of supporting searches around it to bring in extra data.
These are sales orders and quantity ordered over here. These are the numbers that I'm really interested in. And so we want to sort of generate a page where the user can go and input and select a bunch of these and input quantities and generate the purchase order.
And these look like sales order lines on a sales order, correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
So then the script that we have, it's got, right now it has 3 deployments. And the one that we're talking about is the order items generator. This is the one that takes sales orders and outputs purchase orders, but it can be changed to do other things. And it's all controlled in the app setting here. So actually, let me get the list because it's nicer to see. There's 3 sort of deployments of this app, and each have their separate app settings. And this is what really defines what the app is going to do. So the one for order settings is going to be looking at this CRE profile with this ID. This is the main search in it. It's going to produce a list from the primary search. This is the list of columns that we're going to be producing. And so this is just the names or the IDs of the columns. And then down here in this object, we have much more information about each of these. How do we handle them? This one, for example, is an output, but we don't want to see it in the table. This one is going to be part of the preview, but it's not an output. This one defines a filter at the top. This one here, permanently unavailable, is going to be output at the end. It's going to be part of the preview, and it's a checkbox, so it's an input field. The price is an input, and it's currency. It's part of the output. It's what we choose. We need to see this. We need to see this in the preview. It has an action when you change it. It refreshes the total column at the end. And the default value is defined using a JSON path. So this looks up in the CRE data, all this JSON path. Purchase category is another column. It's displayed as text. It also defines a filter at the top of the page, but it's not an output. We don't care about it in the end. Quantity entered, this is the input that the user puts into the integer. There's a maximum value possible, which is another column, quantity ordered. When we change this, again, we update the total field. It's part of the output, and we need to see this in the preview. Quantity in inventory, this is something that we grab from the data. So we have this JSON path here. In the JSON path, we also have this hashtag ID hashtag, which places this token with the ID of the row. So it works for each one. Quantity in queue, this is interesting because there's actually two big pieces of data that are coming in to the app. The data from the CRE, but also we check to see if we've just sent out something in the queue, and if we have, then we can detect it here and we can see how many of that row has been queued up, so we don't count it twice. Quantity in the sales order, and quantity on order, this is more numbers that we need to get. And here for the quantity ordered, we finally get all the quantity ordered, and we take away the location on hand from the CRE data, the quantity on order from the CRE data, and the quantity that's already been queued up. Here we have another hidden field that needs to be output, the subsidiary, an input field that's part of the output, temporarily unavailable. The total field, this is what gets updated when we change the price or we change the quantity entered, and it just gets updated according to this formula. So quantity entered multiplied by the price. The vendor defines a filter at the top as a label. It's an input field, it's a select input field. When we change the input field, we rebuild the vendor address column, which is right next to it. It's part of the output, it's part of the preview, it's required. so you're not going to be able to get further without that. And these are all different options you can set on all the columns. And then finally, we have the vendor address column, which looks up the vendor address from the CRE data according to the vendor that's chosen in this filter box.
Quite a lot of
and
options.
then there's a lot of options for the columns. And this tells which piece of data from CRE identifies each single row. We also hook into Ream on the output side. The app generates a CSV file of all the rows that's selected with all the input that's put into by the user. And here, this is just to say which job type we need to launch and which folder we need to put the CSV file in. And finally, down here, we have some more options, row-specific options. So there's an extra info that appears at the, underneath each row, and that's defined here. We have an on-hand table. That's defined by these JSON path lookups, and we also have an on-order table that's defined by these JSON path lookups. This hide condition option, this is going to hide the row if quantity ordered is empty, or if there's zero quantity ordered. And finally, final on row option is when we check that row, we want to max out the quantity entered field according to whatever the max of quantity entered happens to be. If you take a look at the other things, they're the same structure, but completely different settings. They generate completely different apps. Yeah.
So what it's going to do is, if I understand it correctly, it's going to produce 2 purchase orders, one for 3 stores and one for Abu Ati Suites, with those quantities on it, right?
Well, what it's going to do is going to create one CSV file with these 2 rows, and then we have a Ream import plugin that does produce 2 purchase orders. Yes. Yeah. So we created this CSV file here. Yeah. So this is the file that we've just created. That makes sense. With all the info that we chose.
Right. And that's all been part of our definition that describes the data that we need so we can produce our work, right?
Yeah, all the columns in the setting that have an output setting are included here. The ID and the user are there automatically. Let's go into its import processing records from staging area.